You're listening to the Hello World Podcast, number 39. My name is Sean Wildmuth, and I'm your host. The Hello World Podcast is where you can hear from some of your favorite developers, authors, and speakers about how they got started in this business and the decisions they made along the way. We go way back to their first computer, their first code experience, and their first job. On today's show, I have Tim Heuer. Tim is a program manager for Microsoft, working on the client UI developer platforms. He works on XAML and Windows and previously Silverlight. Before joining the XAML engineering teams, Tim worked with technical communities across the country, helping to foster and build communities focused on software developer technologies. Tim has worked with Microsoft developer tools and technologies since the early 1990s, and prior to joining Microsoft, he worked as a consultant for 14 years, helping to implement technology solutions to enable success in businesses across various industries, such as healthcare, construction, real estate, and electronic commerce. He's inflicted with the unfortunate disease that his work is also his hobby, and he loves technology. You can usually find him behind the keyboard trying to learn something new. You can find him online, sharing his thoughts on technology at timheuer.com/blog. Tim and I have been in the same circles for quite a long time, going back to my early experiences with Silverlight. Tim has always been there with the voice of pragmatism about what is the best way to build things. Today, Tim and I go way back to his early time in Arizona and some of the decisions he made around those first few jobs that ultimately pointed him in the direction of software development. We talk a little bit about his time at Microsoft as well, and how program management seems to suit him just perfectly. Let's take a listen. I'm very excited about today's show. Today I have the illustrious Tim Heuer on the show. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well, Sean. Thank you for having me.
We've known each other for a while now because we were both so much in the XAML space. It's, God, I don't know how long, 7, 8 years, something like that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
You were, I think, in Arizona at the time when we met, but you're up in Seattle these days, right?
I am at the mothership in Redmond.
And you're enjoying the change in, there's a little bit of a change in climate from Arizona to Seattle.
Yeah, just a slight bit. I haven't seen this strange orange thing in the sky lately, and that's the problem.
Wow. I was in Amsterdam for a while, and I thought it had gone as well, so I understand your pain.
Yeah.
But at least it's not 120.
That's correct, yes. But now, all the times that I made fun of my friends when they had a heat wave at 82 degrees, now I understand it. When you don't have air conditioning, your house becomes basically a sauna, and that is not comfortable.
No, it is not. So, I don't think you're allowed to sell a car in Arizona without air conditioning.
Right.
Against the law. Yeah. Well, of course, the podcast is all about how you got started, and so I'm curious, were you one of those kids with a computer growing up, or were you a geek way back then, or did it start differently?
It started really differently for me, actually. I was a geek, but not in the computer sense. I was. I guess we qualify that as a nerd, right? I was pretty much a loner, but I didn't get started in computers myself really until probably like late high school, like really late. But my dad was a programmer, or not anymore, I guess, but he, so I was always around it, and that was my exposure, my interest exposure. But yeah, I did not, I'm not a gamer, so I didn't grow up in the Atari phase, and didn't have any of the old computer styles and everything. My first computer was a Compaq Portable, if you remember those.
I do.
It was, portable is in quotation marks, I think, in the marketing, right? It was the size of a significantly large suitcase. At least mine was.
So was it the giant luggable or the lunchbox they had a little later?
No, it was the giant luggable.
Wow.
And it did absolutely nothing, right? It just had a 3-inch screen with 2 5 1/4s, and that was it.
And now your phone is larger than that.
Yes, and orders of magnitude more powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it's lighter.
Yes. Yeah. So that was, and I thought it was kind of lame, because it didn't do anything.
Right.
And, but my dad used it for work, and then he also, he worked for the city of Phoenix at the time, and so he was one of their first kind of test employees for remote work.
Oh, really?
And so he would bring home his, remote computer. There was no such thing as a laptop then, and his remote computer was basically like a 13-inch tube TV, right? I always laughed when he brought it home because it was in this like padded case. I mean, it took up the passenger seat of his car, right? Wow. That was his portable computer. But, and he would plug it into the phone, and, you get the old, 5600 baud modem sounds and everything. And it was only until then where I started to get interesting, because I distinctly remember the first time he brought that home and he dialed into the terminal. It was basically a dumb terminal, right?
Right.
So he dialed into the terminal, and there was ASCII art that was presented for their login screen. And I thought that was so cool. So that was what kind of piqued my interest. And then I was like, oh, Dad, what's this like big giant thing in the living room here that, you kind of playing around with? And so he kind of introduced me to it. And I remember we wrote like a very, very simple word processing system in BASIC. And that's kind of how I was first introduced to programming, although I didn't really know it at the time. I was just kind of like, oh, do this. And then he got me a couple games, and games during those times were, turn left, look, right. And everything just like
Zork and their ilk.
Yeah. The one that I remember playing, I don't know if you ever played it, but it was called Cutthroats.
Mm-mm.
And it was, you were a scuba diver and you had to go find these treasures, but there was, there was drama, of course, involved.
Sharks and drowning and caves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
That's funny. And so did that pique your interest in college, or?
Still not really, oddly enough. I have always wanted to be, or I had always wanted to be a police officer. That's all I ever wanted to be. I actually didn't want to go to college. I just, at the time too, there wasn't a requirement for police officers to have a college degree. So that's all I wanted to do was I just wanted to be a beat cop and,
wow.
Flip sirens around all day. And so that was kind of my mental path. But my parents were kind of like, you must go to college. So I was, like I said, I was kind of a loner and a nerd. So I was very studious, and I did well. So I got a scholarship to college my first year. Until I realized how much fun college was. Then I lost the scholarship, but that's a different story.
You must have been going to Arizona State.
No, I actually went to Northern Arizona, just a small school that not many people know about.
I just think of Arizona State as a party school.
Party school, yeah. So but in college, I was on a path for more, I guess what you call it, educational leadership. Mm-hmm. During the end, I kind of did college wrong. Because I only wanted to be a police officer, I did all my major coursework up front.
Oh, wow.
So I had English 101 as a senior, which is like, I don't recommend because you're just like super frustrated at that point.
I'm sure.
But in college, I kind of got involved in educational leadership, and I thought that was the path I was going to take. But I was working for the residence life department as my job through college, and my primary responsibility was doing data entry for like incident reports for the family housing units. So there's unfortunately a lot of domestic abuse and things, and so I was responsible for taking the paper and putting into something for history. And so that something got really, really monotonous for me. And this thing called Access 2 had just come out, and I'm like, oh, maybe what's this wizard, and like I could do this. And so I had created for Residence Life, their first kind of data entry database for incident reports, and that that's kind of how I got that next level deeper into interest. But again, I still I was on a different path of doing things, and I actually ended up working for my fraternity right out of college as what they call leadership consultant. So it's basically you're right out of college and you travel to all the different fraternity chapters and make sure they're doing the right things. And
oh, cool.
Different. It was basically traveling. So I was in a different city every 3 days. It was fun.
Wow. And that's what you want to do when you're out of college.
Yeah, exactly. When you're out of college, you want to stay in college. So that was the best job, right? So,
right.
But I got in a bad car wreck on one of my trips, and that sent me back home. And again, I still wasn't really interested, but I was unemployed, homeless, and was engaged to my now wife.
Wow.
I had asked her parents for her hand in marriage, homeless and unemployed. That's not a wise thing I would recommend.
Thing to do.
Yeah, it was gutsy, and they didn't really know me very well, so that was even more gutsy. But in order to solve the unemployment thing, I just took a temp job with just a temp service doing data entry. And if you allow me, this is one of the funniest stories. And had I not seen it, I would not believe it. But my first day, it was with a healthcare company. It was during open enrollment, and for those who don't know, open enrollment in the U.S. is when everybody chooses their benefits, and for large corporations, that's just stacks and stacks and stacks of paperwork.
Yeah.
And so that now most everyone does it online, but at the time it was triplicate forms, and everyone's got to data enter it. So that was open enrollment season, and they just were hiring staff just to put things into the system. And I showed up for this temp job, and the manager at the time, and she was a woman. She was a little ornery, but she kind of walked up to me and she said, "Look, I don't have time for anyone else's crap. You're the fourth person this week," and it was like Tuesday, so it's like 2 days, and they've already burned through. She's like, "If you don't know how to use a computer, you need to get out of here." And she kind of showed me the system, and like, here's a stack of like 4,000 applications. They're just one-page things, and she's like, come back when you're done. And I'm like, okay, and I'm looking at this going, wow, you went through 3 more people before me. Like, oh, there must be like major idiots in the world. And so I, like, in about maybe, I want to say like an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, I kind of went back to her office and I said, "Are there any more?" And she totally didn't. Like, I finished like 4,000 applications in less than 2 hours.
Wow.
And she didn't believe me and was like, "No, you made so many errors. I need to double check this and everything." I was like, "Okay, well, I don't, whatever." And that was my impressing on the thing, and that was probably the thing that jettisoned me, because the IT manager who was in charge at the time, the next day offered me a full-time job because they just wanted to. They needed a strong data entry person. He didn't look at me at all being technical.
Right.
But I was just like getting crap done. And that was, as I look back, that was the thing that was kind of like pushed me over. In that job I had, there was one programmer, and the system was Delphi, and he was kind of looking to get out. And so he took me under his wing, and every time he needed to modify the program because benefits change, et cetera, he would show me what he was doing. And so I kind of became a part of his crew. This was during Windows 95 rollouts at the time as well, and so I got involved in that, and it just kind of grew from there. And the company eventually got acquired by a larger HMO, and during that acquisition, our site, so they were going around to the different sites and upgrading their systems. Our site was the only one that was actually prepared for the system migration.
Wow! And
so myself and my boss were kind of hailed as like, wow, these guys know what they do. And so I got a job for corporate and moved to California, more specifically in systems programming and systems analyst. And that pretty much sunk it for me. Like, I was like, okay, I'm in on this. At the time, salaries were good and things. And
were you enjoying the work? 'Cause if you didn't come up with the passion, did you form it at this point?
I did, yeah, because it was in the corporate world, it was a lot about. So I stayed in healthcare for quite a long time, and healthcare changes, and you're always trying to chase the money and different things, and the laws were interesting, and so there was a lot of decision support things that needed to be built to help make those decisions. And that was, I really enjoyed that challenge, being able to say, like, you were the master of the data, right? You got the vice president saying, should we drop rates by this amount? Prove to me that we should, or that's a bad business decision, know, and you're the only person with the data that can help them get to that decision. And so that was a very, very compelling proposition for me to be in that driver's seat to influence, significant business impact to a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And so that really, that was really really exciting times for me. And I had a kind of a senior developer who was the primary guy in the system, and he didn't want to grow in his career. He just kind of wanted to, sit with his red stapler.
Yeah.
And so he was another person that kind of took me under his wing and said, "This is how the system's built." And so that's actually how I learned SQL in depth.
Oh, nice.
And how I learned more and more kind of COM programming, because the system was COM based.
And so was this also in the middle of where HIPAA was being brought in and electronic medical records were being important and all that?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It was a very, very busy time in healthcare at that point.
Very, very busy time, yes.
Because only everything was changing.
Yeah, only everything was changing. Exactly.
So where did you go from there?
So from there, I actually, I really enjoyed my time with the company. I had a great manager who, helped grow my career. And living in California wasn't working out too well. I kind of, I married my wife and took her away from her family and her friends. That's also not a wise decision. And oddly enough, I'm surprised how well things have worked out and how many dumb decisions I made. But so we were kind of looking to get back to Arizona, and the guy who originally hired me at the for the data entry job had moved to a consulting company.
Oh, nice.
And it was kind of one of the big three in Arizona at the time. And so I called him up, and he said, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll hire you in a second." And so got hired for this consulting company. This was during the start of the .coms. Let's say maybe 2 years before .com type stuff was really peaking, but definitely like the precipice of like web apps and things like that. And so I remember, so we moved back to Arizona. My first meeting was with the Donor Network of Arizona, and they wanted a web-based system for their organ testing. So whether or not you're a match for organ donation. And it involved, from harvesting the organ to the actual testing process. They want it web-based. They wanted, the picture of the deceased person, not the actual picture, but a drawing, right, like an autopsy kind of photo.
Good.
So yeah, so that the field tech can go on their laptop and mark like, oh, this person has a tattoo here, or I made an incision here. And again, they wanted that all web based. Then They wanted Word as their reporting system. And so I'm in this meeting, scrambling all this down, and the tech lead at the time he was a yes man to every freaking thing they were saying.
Wow.
And I'm writing all this down, and we're walking. I remember we ended the meeting. We're walking to the car. He looks over to me. He says, "We can do all that, right?" And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, I'm screwed."
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember going home to my wife that day and saying, "I'm in over my head. This is a colossal failure." I went to Barnes and Noble that night. I bought every possible book on VB6 and Com Plus and ASP at the time.
Yeah.
And DHTML, right? Dynamic HTML.
Wow. So
this
was
I still have that book.
They were asking for, because I kept on thinking, so is this where Tim starts playing with Flash, or this has to be before Silverlight? How is he going to do all this?
Oh, yeah.
DHTML.
This was IE4 had maybe just been released.
Wow.
And so, yeah, all this DHTML and we did it. Like it was amazing. And so I was deep into programming at that, for that project, and figuring out like how to get a web app using Word as reporting, and those type of things. I remember our first failure was like, the customer calls us up and says, the system is really slow and the reports have stopped spitting out, what's going on. And so we drive over there and we look and we go to the server room and we kind of pull up Task Manager, and there must have been, I don't know, like 1,000 instances of winword.exe running. And we're like, oh, maybe we should have closed that object when we're done using it,
Maybe.
So, yeah. So,
maybe.
You learn from those mistakes. But that was a really, the working environment for me was extremely exciting. It was during those times where, VC money was flowing and just everyone was just having a lot of fun, and the job and the environment that I was in was really, really true camaraderie everyone was out to help everyone learn and grow together. And it was just an amazing, amazing experience. I look back now on like all the places I've worked, and by far that is still the funnest place that I've worked. And I still have really, really great friends in the industry, and just great friends from that experience. And we've all kind of splintered, and, got to work on a lot of really cool .com projects at the time. And, unfortunately we were a company that was very deeply vested in .com type stuff, and so bubble burst and we collapsed as well.
Sure, which that's a common story at this point.
Right.
So back in that period before the bubble burst, were you finding an affinity with types of development or languages? Did you have things you preferred?
Yeah, and I think part of it was there was lack of exposure to anything else. And, again, remember my schooling. So, I have a law degree. And so my schooling was not CS. I didn't have any CS at all in school.
Wow.
And any education. So, learning Delphi from the one guy in the healthcare company, and just, having a manager that my career has been successful because I've been able to convince people to take a bet on me.
Right.
And, and I can't thank them enough for doing that. But yeah, the environment that I've always been around has been Microsoft technologies. And so, people can snicker and smirk that, maybe I didn't seek things out and whatnot, and when we were doing the .com stuff, especially, right, this was during like, enterprise Java and all that stuff was kind of like the competitor, and Java server pages were just were really, really in their infancy. But we were a Microsoft shop. The commerce solutions we were building on top were site server. I don't know how many people will remember that.
Wow, but, that's not a great memory for me, but I do remember that.
Yeah, and you know Rob Howard, right? Yeah. So Rob Howard was the site server guy at Microsoft that we would connect with, and so it was all about Microsoft technologies, and I really it really clicked for me. It was very simple for me to understand. I think I would not be successful if I had to really understand deep C++ or things at the time, or even Java at the time, honestly, for me was a little bit foreign, but we were doing a classic ASP and VB6, and it just, it made sense. It made sense to me. It was easy. And like I said, the environment was extremely rewarding because other people wanted to help you. And
you had a solution top to bottom. It wasn't like, okay, we need this other thing. Let's go spend 2 months investigating where to find this. Microsoft kind of handheld us in many ways of saying, oh, you need authentication. Here's this. Oh, you need this. And so as you went up or down the stack, they had an answer.
Exactly. Yeah. So I didn't really have any incentive to look anywhere else. The place where I was making a living and having fun was in the Microsoft space, and it was exciting time, right? I mean, like there was a lot of site server, and SQL 4 was going to SQL 6, and there's just a lot of cool things that Microsoft was doing, and we were one of the first. So Microsoft used to have these programs called joint developer programs, and they would partner with people to kind of deliver first of breed solutions. And I guess we kind of still do that now, but maybe call them something else. But our firm was one of the early ones for .NET.
Nice.
And so, we worked on a project for MetLife at the time. The first kind of .NET web app solution for them, and this was Visual Studio wasn't around. This was when it was still called Cool, not C#.
Yeah.
And crap didn't work, and but it was cool.
CSC.exe was the way to get it all built, and
it was awesome. I mean, that was like being on the cusp of like a significant language change. Was really fun, and we had an opportunity to work pretty close with Microsoft and kind of give feedback, and as well kind of, start asserting ourselves as the experts in that area.
Sure. And so
that was really exciting. Yeah.
And when you think back to, you touched on this a little bit a minute ago. You have a degree in law, and you really didn't come from the CS space. Do you think that things would have been different if that weren't the case? Yeah,
I would assume so.
Sure.
Yeah. I think, I remember when I was working for this consulting firm, and I remember I still I enjoy aspects of law and law enforcement and legal aspects. And, I still tell myself, should I do more in that area? But I do remember when September 11th happened, I that kind of sparked something in my industry. So at the time, immediately after that happened, all federal agencies were really seeking out cryptographers and a lot of highly technical people. And I thought to myself, wow, this is maybe an opportunity for me to get back into something that was originally my passion and now apply a new skill set to that. And could I get the best of both worlds?
Sure.
So I actually did seek that out. And I'm kind of a little maybe embarrassed to admit this, but the only reason why I didn't is the money was so good in the .com days that I would have been taking a 50% pay cut to go work for the government. And it was just a financial decision was the only reason that actually prevented me from doing that. And, being successful in the tech industry at that time was really kind of a golden handcuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
so
it's interesting you say that, because at that same time I had the same thought. Was, could I help in ways that I could help? And I actually looked at some of the agency jobs, but because I've dropped out of some of the best schools in the world, they required a degree, which I don't have. And so it just, I never even got to the point of figuring out whether we could do it financially, and felt a little embarrassed by that whole process because, because there was that moment of, I can't help by going to New York and doing these things, but how else could I help?
Right. Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear that.
Yeah.
So when you were working at the consulting company, were you doing more lead work or more, getting your hands dirty work?
I mostly was a getting my hands dirty work kind of guy. There was probably three really good kind of mentors that I would say that I had. I'll give him a shout out because they're good friends. Chris Johnson, he ended up being kind of one of the main guys at the company, and he actually now has an extremely successful company in Arizona that's based on digital marketing and digital solutions.
Nice.
And then two of my other good friends, Bert Solano and Matt Birmingham, we were. And this wasn't the whole crew, but these are the guys that I remember being a part of this crew that was developing this commerce solution that kind of allowed me to be a part of their group and educate me on the ways of doing things. I don't know if they were the right ways of doing things.
The way that you guys as a team worked.
The way that we understood them. Yeah. And so they were kind of the more senior people and the thought leaders and strategic, folks. And I was happy to kind of just be the worker bee.
Sure.
But over time, I think by default, by the way of things kind of imploding in the industry, and I did stick around. I definitely was one of the last men standing for the ship on the company, and again, maybe that wasn't a wise decision, but I'm totally risk adverse, so I wasn't really looking to take another jump somewhere.
Sure.
But over time, I think maybe I got that seniority and definitely led a couple efforts, but it really wasn't until my next job where I was considered more of a tech lead.
And that transition from being someone who's slinging code, to use the vernacular every day, to someone who's helping lead a team, what is that transition like? And do you have to give up some of the control over the kind of code you're producing to do that?
Yeah, I think you definitely do, because I think your responsibilities are, more to the customer now, especially when you think about consulting. Actually, every job you could apply this, but consulting, because you have billable hours, and I know this, Sean,
yeah.
Right? You're more owned to the estimates that you've provided to the customer. You want, if you told them that it's going to take $100 for them to get the solution, it better take only $100, or else you're going to have an unhappy customer.
Yeah. And
then your responsibility is now also to your company, right, to make sure that you maximize profits and things. So it's a weird calculation you got to try to meet.
Yeah.
But in that regard, so when you're a lead, you need to focus on some of those business aspects, and so you can't be as hands-on as you want, because your responsibility is to the project a little bit more rather than to the individual module of code that you're working on. So you take on this role of mentorship a little bit more, and find that person that you can educate and help them learn ways of better optimizing things and things like that. So I definitely think the transition goes from hands-on to mentorship, I think, is the way that I saw it, and kind of still try to see it today.
And do you think that's the same in your current role at Microsoft, that you're mentoring, but maybe internal as well as external people?
Yeah, I think it's, I've been really thinking a lot about that lately. I am a manager of people now, mm-hmm. and I think there's some implied mentorship when you're a manager of people. And I have to be honest, like, I think if you polled the folks that work directly for me now, I'm probably not the best mentor now. And, I think that's an indicator of time.
Sure.
It's amazing that I actually have time to talk with you. and I'm grateful that I do have that time.
Me too.
The rest of the day I'll be in somebody else's office, so I'm in a lot more meetings. So I think, the more you grow in your career, the more people are seeking to you to make either strategic or just decisions. And so it's been challenging to find that time to be a better mentor. I don't think you can mentor from afar, I guess, is my philosophy. So you definitely need to kind of walk around and spend time. And I've been really, really trying to be better. I do think that is a responsibility in my role here at Microsoft. It's just it's been more challenging than in my past roles.
Sure, I could see that, and I suspect it's a bigger group as well. I mean, that you're part of, not just that the people you're managing, but there's probably more layers and more people that you're responsible to as well as that are responsible to you.
Exactly.
So if you had to look back at your career, is there anything you would change? Is there a pivotal decision that you thought, if I'd done that, that would be different, or that would be different? Or are you really happy with where things have gone?
I couldn't be happier. Like I said, if two people hadn't taken a chance on me, I couldn't tell you where I'd be. Sure. And, either I fooled them or they're gamblers, but, regardless, it has worked out well for me. And, I've been married for 18 years, and my wife also says, we have never made a bad decision. We have never made a wrong decision, whether it was, relocating to California or coming back to Arizona or switching jobs, or, for a time I kind of went on my own independent. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine making any better decisions along the way. Certainly if I had said, yes, I still only want to be a police officer, absolutely, like complete different life path.
Sure.
But I can't imagine any other decision that I've made, working out better.
Well, I've always really appreciated your the way you deal with the technology. All our inner dealings certainly were that way. And when I watch your videos at Tech Ed and some of the other conferences, I've always appreciated that clarity. I think that sometimes comes with not having a degree, because you kind of know what it means to be in that moment of how do I solve this, instead of how is the what's the right or wrong way versus how to just solve something. And right. I've always appreciated that.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. The analogy I sometimes draw is, in baseball, and I know you're a baseball fan.
I am.
They talk about coaches being a player's coach.
Right.
Right. And so I think my lack of depth in engineering knowledge allows me to be a developer's developer.
Right.
Is kind of how I think about it. I realize when I walk in the room, I am not the smartest guy in the room. I completely realize that. And every tech ed or build or whatever presentation that I do, I learn something from every question asked to me. And I'm challenged like every time from customers. My inbox comes in with, "Hey, we're trying to do this in XAML and it's not working," and I'd be like, "Wow. Not even sure why, interesting." And so I learn something every day. Yeah. And yeah, I just approach it from like, hey, I'm just like everyone else, just like trying to use the systems that are placed in front of me in what I believe is the most logical way. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And, yeah, I think I believe that's helped me relate to the community a lot better rather than, being, a really, really hardcore in-depth thing, which, there's people that do both of those well as
Absolutely.
additional.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciated hearing your story. I hope that you get to see the sun at some point.
Yes, actually, we've had a great summer so far. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And summer in Seattle is what, 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. It ends in a couple hours, in fact. Yeah.
Right. Well, you have a great day, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Hello World podcast. Remember, you can subscribe to the Hello World